Welcome to the 80s and 90s presents 99, where every day is a party like it's 1999. Here's your hosts, Jamie Fenderson and Milo Dennison.
So today we're going to talk about the Y2K bug scare, Milo. You remember that?
I was there. Imagine, audience, it's New Year's, December 31st, 1999. Some of us are getting ready to make out with some hot chick or dude. Some of us are hammered off our asses. Some of us are singing Auld Lang Syne, and others are stressed with their fingers crossed, waiting to see if the world is going to end.
Yeah. And that was a kind of a big scare. It was for real.
I was in Vegas. I was part of the drunk and getting ready to make out with somebody.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. But the world was maybe going to end too because of this computer bug. So that gave you reason to party even harder, right?
I think so. I think there were a lot more people out that year than normal years. And it was all that was being talked about leading up to that. Like, people were wondering, are computers going to crash? Are airplanes going to fall out of the sky? Are nuclear missiles going to suddenly just explode and submarines sink to the bottom of the ocean?
Yeah. So for listeners who might not know what the Y2K bug scare is, it's the year 2000 bug, or the millennial bug. So what happened was, when a lot of the core computer programs were written in the 60s and 70s and 80s, computer programmers, not only for software, but for hardware, they used only 2 digits for the year. So like 1989 would be just 89, 1972 would just be 72. But then they figured out, oh, well, when the year 2000 hits, like, what's going to happen? Because we're only using 2 digits now. So is it going to go back to like 1900? So they thought, well, like, everything's going to blow up because the computers aren't going to know what year it is. It was really big scare for banks, because banks thought that all their interest calculations would get all jacked up and they lose a whole bunch of money, and people would gain a whole bunch of money and whack them out, which that's what Peter Gibbons in Office Space was doing, updating bank software for the year 2000 switch. That was his job. Yeah, that was his job.
Did you get the memo on that?
Did you do your TPS reports on your Y2K bug thing? But the banks were really, I think the banks probably should have been more concerned about like subprime mortgages and their own greed than a computer bug, because less than a decade after Y2K, like, the real disaster hit. But yeah, transportation was another thing. They thought, well, maybe airplanes would fall out of the sky because they just don't know what year it is or whatever. So it was kind of a big concern. Now, a lot of countries and governments and companies spent millions of dollars trying to make sure that they were, quote unquote, Y2K compliant. And there were a bunch of companies that made a bunch of money selling Y2K compliant software.
Our software is Y2K compliant. Would you like to buy it? Yeah. And on that is the thing. I think the U.S. actually spent more in the billions of dollars because, our government was the most paranoid. Bill Clinton actually signed a law in 1998 called the Year 2000 Information and Readiness Disclosure Act that basically encouraged companies to share their Y2K data with each other without, creating any liability in regards to the way that was shared. So that's how paranoid the US was. And what's funny about this too is, like, other countries like Russia didn't spend hardly anything on it, worrying about it. And I guess they were in the right on that one because not a whole lot happened.
No. And I guess according to what I was reading, countries and companies that really didn't invest a whole lot into this Y2K compliance fared no worse than those who spent millions or even billions of dollars on it. So it was really a big kind of a hoax in a way, I think, because I think a lot of companies were kind of stirring it up and making money off it. Like, you had a lot of companies selling Y2K compliant services and software. We'll make you Y2K compliant, right? And it's if anything, you could just have your programmers just change the date to a 4-digit format, and that's kind of all you need to do. But even if you don't do that, probably nothing's going to happen anyway. Nothing happened, man. The lights were still on when you were in Vegas and I was in Tokyo. The lights were still on.
That's the thing. Some argue that, some of the work that they did do prior to that did make a difference. And I guess you could say maybe it did. But I think the fact that we can look at Russia and all of them came through on the other side with very little issues kind of proves that that money spent prepping for that and panicking over it was really all for nothing. So for those people that bought that Y2K compliant software, well, good decision on that one.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that money. Yeah, that was the scare of its time, though. I think every once in a while, you just have big irrational scares. Sometimes you have big rational ones, like this current COVID thing's like a scare, but it's like real. Like people are actually dying, right? But sometimes you get scares just for things that might happen. Like, I don't know, when I was a kid, there was that satanic panic where all, we go to my cousins.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. My mom's like, you can't play that game. It's Satan's work. or we'd go to my cousin's house because they told us, oh, you shouldn't play records backwards. And we're like, yeah, we're totally going to do that since you told us not to. And we go play records backward. And everybody was afraid that Satan was going to like possess the souls of the youth, right? It was a real scare, but it's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was kind of along those lines where maybe it got blown up and talked about so much that it became a way bigger deal than it actually was. And we don't learn from history, man. We just keep having these kind of big scares. I'm interested after COVID what the next irrational one will be that I can identify.
Yeah, I think the US more than a lot of other countries suffers from that. I mean, look at how much the government and the country spends on its military because of how paranoid it is of terrorist attacks and, all this other stuff.
The Reds.
Yeah, exactly.
The Reds coming
to get us.
The commies are going to come back.
Or now it's the Chinese. I think everybody's like, the Chinese are going to come get us, that kind of stuff. And the reality is these other countries don't really want conflict either. Some do, obviously. I mean, we were attacked in 2001, but that's a rarity. And it's like, we're always preparing for these rarities because we're scared.
Well, yeah. And I think the issue, what Y2K shows is I think we should be concerned about risks coming up. Sure. I'm not saying, hey, we should just laissez-faire and not even plan for risky things.
Oh, I agree. I'm not saying don't spend any money on the military.
No, I know. But what you're saying is, look, it's a risk, but it's not, but Americans are so good at just blowing things up and putting it on tabloids, right? And making mockumentaries about it with Geraldo Rivera. And all of a sudden it's this giant thing that started out as a risk and we got to do something about it, change our numbers. But now it's like, oh, Y2K is coming and Satan is coming with him and he's going to go beat your grandma and the whole world's going to blow up and all of this craziness, right? It's like, yeah, but it's I don't know. It's kind of fun to watch, though. It's kind of fun to watch in a way. I think it's bad, but it's also fun to watch. Y2K was fun. Did you have any impacts to you, like at work or anything?
I was working at AT&T at the time in a call center, and I don't remember if I was like on the phones at that point or if I had moved off and was in one of the back end teams. But I do remember that was all the talk because it was the same thing. They were upgrading all their systems to make sure everything was compliant and all this kind of stuff. But me personally, no, it really didn't have any effect on me whatsoever, other than like, it's year 2000. Let's go party it up this New Year's and make a big production out of it.
Yeah, I was in the Navy, so it was kind of a scary thing too, because it's like, warships and things. But I think we didn't have like a lot of vendors. Like we wouldn't buy Y2K compliant software like we do, kind of like military does. Some with that kind of thing probably does its own thing or gets like a very secure vendor that they vetted. So it wasn't kind of like that, like get this off the shelf. I think what it boils down to is, hey, this thing's coming. You'd probably be best to like make your 2 digits, 4 digits wherever you have dates. And that's it. That's it, man. And even if you don't do that, probably be okay too. But just to make sure, make the 2 digits, 4 digits, and that's. I think that's all you really needed to do. It's a really irrational kind of big scare for no reason. But it won't be the last. I'm sure it won't be. I'm just after the COVID thing, which is a real scare. I'm interested to see what the next irrational scare will be.
On the plus side, it did give us some entertaining television. Simpsons did a fun episode where Homer doesn't do his work in the factory in the nuclear power plant. And of course, everything switches over and planes fall out of the sky and they think it's the end of the world. I think that was one of their Treehouse of Horror episodes. Family Guy did a fun episode where nuclear missiles go off and Stewie gets turned into a little squid monster thing, and they go and stay at a Twix factory for food. So we got some good television out of the Y2K scare.
Yeah. Those funny cartoon shows had a heyday with this, because they probably know, the writers know. They're like, oh yeah, we know. Let's just blow this up even further and make fun of it.
Yep, that's what they did, and it worked.
Yeah. Y2K? Gosh, man.
Yeah, good times. Good times.
Good times.
We won't be around for Y3K.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, like, we have to wait a whole nother 800 years before, like, Y1.
Yeah, we won't. It won't happen. We'll be gone.
What do you call 2100? 2100 is like,
get yourself cryogenically frozen.
Yeah, but what do you call that? Y1K? Y21K?
I was thinking Y3K.
But that's year 3000.
I know.
I'm thinking year 2100. Wouldn't that happen then too? That wouldn't happen. Yeah, it would happen then too, wouldn't it? 2100?
I guess, but I would imagine they've all been updated to 4-digit codes by now.
Well, then it'll never happen again.
It'll never happen again until after 10K.
Oh, well.
The entire population of the planet will be gone by then.
Maybe. Well, 10,000 years from now, what do you think? I mean, we might still be around.
Well, not us personally.
Not us, but our descendants of our descendants of our descendants. They probably even evolved into, like, they kind of look different because they evolved.
Yeah, language is all different.
But they're still dumb, so they're like, oh, it's Y3K.
They're still paranoid. It's Y10K. What do we do?
Oh no, we're artificially intelligent beings with, like, computer brains, and we're all going to blow up. Y3K.
Post it on virtual social media, metamedia.
Let our colonies on Mars know what's going on.
Yep.